Welcome back to the Dirty Rhetoric podcast. I'm Peter Pascal, and for this episode, we have a big movie that's coming up, December 18th, and it's the return of Star Wars. And along with Star Wars, we of course have Yoda. And Yoda is a fabulous character for us to study rhetoric, because almost everything Yoda says, all those famous quotes he uses, are examples of rhetoric. So let's take a deep dive into the study of the language of Yodish. Yoda is memorable because he diverges from standard word orders. And he demonstrates a fundamental law of rhetoric, and that is, when different we speak, memorable we become. And I do apologize, I will try to keep the Yoda impersonations to a minimum during this podcast, but it is rather tricky. Yoda has two layers to his language. There's an upper layer that's a really obvious slap-you-in-the-face layer, and that's a rhetorical technique called hyperbaton. Now, with this technique, word orders are deliberately mangled to a point where an audience can't fail to notice that there's something going on. Hyperbaton either makes you sound wise or weird, but more normally weird. It's impossible to slip past the audience unnoticed, and really, if you're using this rhetorical figure, then the whole point is the audience are going to notice. We use hyperbaton at really dramatic moments in life. For example, when we get married. Some of us use the traditional wedding vow of, "With this ring I thee wed." Now, those words are in the wrong order. That's because it's a hyperbaton. Edgar Allan Poe was fond of them in his poetry. For example, "Object was there none, passion was there none." Even an exasperated Winston Churchill, who was the most erudite of speakers, once blurted out, "This is the sort of nonsense up with which I will not put." So we've got classical wedding vows, Edgar Allan Poe and Winston Churchill, and they're all sounding a bit like Yoda, because this is the structure that Yoda uses, reversing word orders. Hyperbaton, however, is one of the few rhetorical tools that you won't find in our Dirty Rhetoric toolkit. And that's for the simple reason that I don't think many of you would want to sound like Yoda in your next presentation, because get you promoted, it wouldn't. Well, not unless your boss was really, really into Star Wars, and probably about 14 years old. For the really clever stuff about Yodish, though, we have to look deeper. Everything Yoda is doing is being expressed in this clownish structure of hyperbaton. But go a little deeper and you see there's a whole extra level of rhetoric running just beneath the surface. Yodish is rhetoric that's been wrapped in rhetoric. And that hidden layer is something that rhetoric's earliest founders called hidden darts. It's when you have structures that sound kind of normal, but actually have exceptional little twists and turns in them that make them stick invisibly in the memory, just like a hidden dart. So let's take a closer look at a couple of Yoda's greatest hits. And because these are structures you could use in your everyday presenting and writing, these are structures that you will find included in the Dirty Rhetoric toolkit. So, first of all, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. These famous words of wisdom that Yoda gave to trainee Jedi Luke are expressed in a structure called last word, first word. The last word of one phrase is becoming the first word of the next. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. It's a fabulous tool to link things together in a series of logical stepping stones. So your point appears to demonstrate logic. Logic leads to credibility. Credibility creates belief. So, last word, first word, therefore, helps you build belief within your audience. Believe you they will. I'm sorry, the Yoda impersonations do keep creeping in. Let's take another look at a different rhetorical technique. Now, this one's a little more subtle, and Yoda is using it at a time when Luke is experiencing grave doubts about if his mortal frame can work with the Force. And what Yoda says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." This is the technique of opposites. We've got the opposite between luminous and crude matter. Good writing and speaking relies on building tension by invoking opposites. You might even say your communications live or die by it. And it does have a beauty in that it can be as unsubtle as two clashing cymbals, or it can be really quite beneath the radar, just as long as we've got that counterbalance going in there. Let's take a quick look at just one more, and then we'll finish for the day. This is the most famous Yoda quote of the lot. "Do or do not, there is no try." For this one, we've actually got a whole cluster of clever rhetorical stuff coming together, and all with the most beautiful subtlety. First of all, can you spot another use of those opposites? Do or do not. That's two opposite states of being, and that's setting up a dramatic contrast at the very beginning. The next thing going on is we've got a three-block structure, because the phrase is delivered in three blocks, and we call this a trio structure. Do or do not. There is no try. Now, even though it's not the strictest example of a structure of a trio, what the grouping is doing is it's creating rhythm and some momentum through the phrase. And then finally, we've got logic in the mix as well, because Yoda's using a rhetorical logic structure called sum total. It's in three parts. Part 1, only two states of being are possible. Part 2, those states are do or do not. Part 3, conclusion, try, therefore cannot exist. Do or do not. There is no try. It's a three-part logic structure, and it's really hard to argue with. So, the force of rhetoric runs everywhere, and nowhere does it run deeper than with Master Yoda, and personally I am so looking forward to the movie coming out and to hearing some of the latest Yoda catchphrases. When we look beyond all those reversals of conventional word order and take a deeper peek into the script, all of Yoda's colossal quotability is coming from rhetoric, and you will find all those Yoda tools contained within the Dirty Rhetoric toolkit for writers and presenters. You can find out more about Dirty Rhetoric at our website, which is www.dirtyrhetoric.com. You can find us on Twitter, you can follow us on Facebook, and above all, please do come find us on Kickstarter, where we have information about our new and exciting product launch. So we really hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you're going to the movie, then we hope you enjoyed the movie, and we hope we've encouraged you to try out with rhetoric. Help you it will.